Viaduct Fishery in Somerset, known for its huge weights of hard-fighting carp. Hundreds of pounds are caught here on a daily basis, but there's a little bit more to it than just carp. Paul Greenwood, fishery manager, has joined us today to talk about the silverfish stocks that live here at Viaduct. One thing that seems to be growing now in popularity is the silverfish side of the sport. How has that all developed with the amount of carp that swim around?
They come hand in hand, really. A carp, you need the silverfish, obviously, to mop up all the bait from the carp fishing when everybody's banging a lot of pellet in. This obviously aids to the volume and the size of the fish. A lot of anglers now prefer to fish for silvers, especially in the winter. You know, when you've got the head of the skimmers and the tench that we've got, you know, you can go a positive day's fishing down here.
Your silverfish leagues and your matches are very, very well attended. We've brought a couple of guys down today, Darren Cox and Ian Didcote, to try and catch a few. So I'm going to nip down and see how they're getting on. It might be raining, but it's certainly not going to dampen our spirits. So Ian, you're clearly catching a few.
Starting to sort of sneak a few now, just coming to settle over the bait.
Obviously you're feeding pro natural and you're fishing sort of worms and casters and natural baits with it. How many balls have you fed on your short line and how many on your long line?
2 balls just with a little bit of bait in on my short line, sort of 6 metres. A few casters, a few maggots, a little bit of chop worm, 25, 50 mil of bait in 2 balls, and then I've obviously fed a longer line where I fed 6 balls at the start with probably double the amount of bait in.
So you fed a little bit of bait short to try and catch fish over instantly. You've laid a big table out there for the fish to come over and settle over the top. You start on your short line, catch roach and everything that comes along, just to give your long line plenty of time to settle. The longer you leave it, the better it is when you go on it then.
Yeah, usually when you've caught sort of for 40 minutes, maybe an hour on your short line, catching all sort of fish that are just putting extra weight into your net, and then when you do go long, hopefully if you've left it for an hour, giving it an odd top up of bait every now and then, you drop in and it usually is heaving. You can just pick the fish off and top up as and when you go. The good thing about fishing a short line as well, you can actually learn how the fish are wanting to feed. You're topping up with like little bits of ground bait or little bits of worms or, you know, loose feeding casters, and it's working. You know it's going to work out there as well.
Well, Coxie's sneaking a few as well, is he?
Yeah.
What are you fishing, just what we call a conventional rig?
I've got a couple of rigs set up. I've got a bulk and a couple of droppers rigs, and I've got a couple of pop-up rigs set up as well. I didn't want to fish like too big of baits because obviously we are on a carp venue, and unfortunately you run the risk of catching a few carp. What we're doing is fishing tiny little bits of bait, like little tiny bits of worms, single maggots. If you imagine your ground bait's on the bottom with the minced up worm in it, and the fish are just coming across, sifting through the ground bait, picking up little bits of worm. The last thing you want to do is have a great big piece of worm sitting over top of your ground bait, because when Mr. Carp comes along, he's just going to go, oh look. They're not going to spend so long in the peg sifting through little bits of the ground bait trying to find little bits of worm, but the skimmers will. You'll find that you get more positive bites and quicker bites fishing little bits. You can fish them on great big hooks as well. A tiny little pea-sized piece of worm on it, you think it doesn't look right, but it goes under.
Baitac Pro Natural is a new ground bait that's taken the angling world by storm. This is very, very different from any of the other ground baits in the Baitac range, purely because it's a multi-species mix. Ian's been a key part of the development of this, and we've also now just launched the Pro Natural Dark. What was the reason for developing a darker side?
Given the water conditions we're under these days during the summer, like low water conditions, very, very clear, weedy.
On rivers.
Canals, and you know, natural venues as well. But a dark mix is far more susceptible to catching a lot more fish over than like a light mix. Fish feel a bit more confident coming over it. They can feed over it for longer periods. It's not so blatant on the bottom, so
it's not going to spook them. They're not afraid
going
of
to spook.
Right.
You know, not going to cast a shadow to obviously attract the attentions of predation.
So we've mixed a bag of each up, the dark and the natural, and there's quite a stark contrast there, isn't there? One thing I know you were insistent on was the lack of dye used to darken it. When we've fed ground baits with dye in the past, they just wash out. So this has been developed to make sure it doesn't come off on your hands. It's not a dyeing agent that's actually used to darken it.
No, it's a completely natural product. Coming up with a ground bait which
that's beautiful,
is that colour, and it stays that colour, it can give you massive confidence about catching a lot more fish in low, clear conditions any time of the year. That will be my sort of set to ground bait for the whole year. I mean, I've been having like 20-pound weights where people either side of me are catching barely double figures. I've got so much confidence in it that the fish are just going to come to it and stay on it.
The key ingredients to this, fish love eating.
I mean, I just think it's going to be absolutely fantastic for everybody concerned. It can be used with a multitude of different baits as well. Some of our sponsored anglers took it to the World Pairs in Ireland. Half of them finished in the top 10, you know, winning their sections every day, fishing it for a feeder.
It's not coincidence, is it?
No. This ground bait keeps producing the goods.
It's a great feeder ground bait as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, because of the properties in it and the way it breaks down and the way it holds together, it's perfect through an open ender for your natural big waters. Are you going to put any pellets through it?
Just natural baits today. Going to feed sort of a few casters, odd dead maggot, a reasonable helping of like minced up chopped worm.
You like murdering worms, don't you?
I do like murdering worms. You know, the results speak for itself.
Yeah.
Put all that in, mix it up, make up sort of 4 or 5 balls and pot it in. Judging on how you're catching, top up with a big ball with similar amounts of bait in, or you're going to top up with like neat worms, neat casters. Normally on here you have to feed a ball and
fish it out
fish
quick,
it out,
top it
and
up,
then they
top
top
it
it
up,
out,
top
top
it
it
up,
up.
yeah.
But they've stayed over the ground bait for so long today, we've not had to like top up so regular as you normally would do. How you doing?
All right, you all right?
Yeah, good. Catching a few?
Yeah, it's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, plenty of small fish to be caught, plenty of skimmers to be caught.
Well, that's the classic thing about fishing in winter and autumn times on these commercials. You don't have to catch carp to have a good day's fishing, do you?
No, that's right. I mean, sometimes, you've got another one there. Lovely, just
Yeah.
right on cue. A lot of venues, much like this one, they run a silver pool as well as a carp pool every day.
Yeah, you catch these all day long, can't you?
Yeah. So how have you fed it today?
Well, I've done it a little bit differently to you. I've got some Pro Natural, I've got some Special J Gold. 50-50 mixed that. It's really nice, fine mix. So I've split my ground bait, and half the ground bait I've loaded with micros.
Soaked up micros, yeah?
Soaked up, yeah. So nice and damp. You can still see them in the ground bait. You know, they soften right up. It's like a fine ground bait with a large particle in it. That's absolutely perfect for holding those hand-sized skimmers.
Your weight
And
builders.
yeah, when you